Roronoa Zoro will likely never eat a devil fruit. This was something confirmed by Eiichiro Oda, where he in an SBS was asked about what devil fruits each of the Straw Hats should have, and Oda gave all of the crew their perfect fruits, except for Zoro, where Oda himself said that he'd rather Zoro not become a devil fruit user. This only makes sense, considering that none of the swordsmen whose legacy Zoro follows in the story had actually eaten a fruit. Yet, who's to say that Zoro himself needs to eat a devil fruit to gain its powers? If we look at the full quote from Oda that I just showed you, what he actually says is that instead of Zoro, Oda would rather one of Zoro's swords eat a devil fruit. And Oda even reveals what devil fruit he would want Zoro to have. I will later in this video reveal what this mythical fruit Oda was talking about was, but even beyond that, I will actually break down why there's so much evidence that Zoro will very likely get exactly this devil fruit sword Oda mentioned in the current Elbaf arc. Objects eating devil fruits is actually an extremely old concept in One Piece, where it was first introduced 25 years ago in Alabasta. Up until very recently, these devil fruit objects were honestly never a very serious part of the story, where they were mainly used by weaker characters, and had never presented much of a threat. This all however changed in the Elbaf arc, when we were introduced to Shanks' brother, Figarland Shamrock. Shamrock is in possession of a sword that turns into the mythical creature, Cerberus, and this thing is on a whole other level compared to the devil fruit objects we've seen before, where simply seeing Cerberus scared someone as strong as Loki. Cerberus was able to do things we've never seen before in the story, where Shamrock was able to separate the creature from his sword, and have it move and act on its own without Shamrock's aid. Cerberus' introduction basically opened a whole new avenue of possibilities to the One Piece story, where weapons that have eaten devil fruits are now clearly no longer a joke, but are tools wielded by some of the strongest characters in the story. Elbaf has also possibly already introduced another one of these devil fruit weapons, where Loki's hammer is also able to emit lightning, hinting that it too may have eaten a devil fruit. This then brings up several interesting questions. What other devil fruit weapons could there exist in the story? Which other characters could actually be in possession of these weapons? And most importantly, will Zoro actually get a devil fruit sword of his own? Well, it could be that Oda himself has actually already answered that last question. In the SBS I brought up earlier, Oda revealed that it would be awesome if one of Zoro's swords ate the fish fruit mythical type, model Azure Dragon, which is Kaido's devil fruit. This is very funny to me personally, because I started working on this video before I had read this SBS, and I had literally come to the same conclusion as Oda, that Kaido's dragon fruit would be the perfect fit for Zoro. Zoro's character for years now has been very heavily linked with dragons, where he has several attacks themed around them, and we've now learned that Zoro is the descendant of sword god Ryuma, who was a samurai famous for having slain a dragon. Zoro in Punk Hazard also replicated this feat of his ancestor by slaying a dragon of his own. While this dragon connection is all well and good though, I think the real appeal of Zoro getting a dragon sword would be in the abilities that it would grant him. The Azure Dragon Fruit is one of the most versatile devil fruits in all of One Piece, where it allows the user to manipulate elements like fire, wind and lightning, and the fruit also gives the user the ability to both fly and levitate objects with its flame clouds. Any sword that ate this fruit would also likely become incredibly durable, where the dragon fruit is noted to make one incredibly sturdy due to how tough dragon scales are. A sword being durable is very important, where we frequently see characters in the story, including Zoro himself, get their blades broken in combat. This is also something Zoro personally values, where he noted that Shushui for example was so tough that it wouldn't bend even if a dinosaur stepped on it. Zoro having the power of a mythical dragon at his command would definitely make him look like one of the endgame characters of One Piece, where he could potentially do everything Kaido did by just using his sword. If Shamrock is any example, Zoro with a sword like this could even potentially do something as bonkers as conjuring a literal dragon to fight by his side. In other words, Zoro could ascend from being a dragon slayer to the far more prestigious title of Dragon Tamer. However, there is still the big question looming over this theory. Even if Oda played with the idea of Zoro getting a sword like this, how could this actually happen in this story? The last time we saw Kaido was in Wano, and it to this day has still not been confirmed if he died or not. If Kaido did die, this would mean that his devil fruit would have respawned somewhere in Wano, which means that Zoro wouldn't be able to get it, as Zoro and the other Straw Hats already left Wano days ago. Even though this may sound like a problem, the answer to Zoro getting his hands on the Azure Dragon Devil Fruit is actually incredibly simple. Zoro does not necessarily need the fruit that belonged to Kaido, but he could simply make his own fruit. Years ago in the story, Kaido was a captive of the world government, and Vegapunk got to experiment on Kaido's lineage factor. The result of this was Vegapunk creating an artificial copy of Kaido's devil fruit, which is the fruit that was later eaten by Momonosuke. While Vegapunk called this fruit imperfect, this was only because the fruit turned the user into a pink dragon instead of a blue one. And other than this small detail, the fruit actually gave you all the powers of an Azure Dragon. After the Egghead arc, Vegapunk Lilith has traveled with the Straw Hats to Elbaf. She has now become a full-blown ally of the crew, and she also plans on setting up a new lab on the island. On paper, there would actually be nothing stopping Lilith from making another copy of Kaido's fruit and feeding it to one of Zoro's swords. The Vegapunks are actually the ones who invented the technology for objects to eat devil fruits in the first place, and it genuinely would not surprise me if they are actually the ones who personally made Shamrock's sword for him when they were still working for the government. And as brought up earlier, the Vegapunks are already in possession of Kaido's lineage factor and have already succeeded in creating an artificial devil fruit from it. What all of this means is that Lilith should already have everything she needs to turn one of Zoro's swords into a devil fruit infused object with the powers of an Azure Dragon, and it could even be that the story is genuinely setting this up. Because this is already an idea brought up by the author in an SPS, this could mean that this is something that will happen in the story. While the SPS are on paper just fan questions, Oda in reality also frequently uses them to set up future events in the story. Just as an example, we've in the SPS gotten drawings of what a lot of the characters in the story looked like when they were kids, and many of these images set up huge things in the series, like the designs of the Seraphim or even Blackbeard's inability to sleep. Aside from Oda mentioning one of Zoro's swords getting this fruit in an SPS, there is also possible setup in the manga that Lilith would do this kind of favor for Zoro, as Lilith very much owes Zoro a debt. During the Egghead arc, there was a scene where Lilith was about to be attacked by S-Hawk, but Zoro intervened and ended up saving her life. Beyond Lilith owing Zoro, there's also a very simple reason that I brought up earlier, where the Vegapunks thought they failed with the artificial dragon fruit they made being pink. This likely means that someone like Lilith still wants to create a perfect copy of the fruit to prove her genius. If Lilith on Elbaf created this copy of the Azure Dragon fruit and fed it to one of Zoro's swords, she would essentially at the same time be paying her debt back to Zoro, while also finally getting the chance to get the fruit's color right. Granted, I suppose it could also be funny if the fruit was once again a failure, and again had the wrong color, but that it would this time be green to match Zoro's aesthetic. I'm personally not sure which of Zoro's swords would get this devil fruit upgrade, but I honestly feel like it would make the most sense to give it to Enma. Enma is now the sword that has been used to scar a user of the Azure Dragon fruit 2 separate times by 2 different swordsmen. Zoro has also already started performing his dragon team techniques with just Enma, and I suppose it would also only make sense for Zoro to give this fruit to his strongest sword, where Enma has been confirmed to be even more powerful than the Wado Ichimonji. So, to put it very simply, the theory here is that Lilith at some point during the Elbaf arc will create another artificial copy of the Azure Dragon Devil Fruit, and that she'll feed it to Enma as thanks for Zoro saving her life, making Zoro a wielder of a Devil Fruit sword that Oda has personally said would be awesome for him to have. An important question that needs to be asked though, is that would Zoro even want a Devil Fruit sword? I mentioned this at the very start of this video, where Zoro has never in any way relied on Devil Fruit powers, nor have seemingly any of the swordsmen whose legacy he is following. If Lilith came to Zoro with the offer of giving one of his swords the powers of a dragon, is it possible that Zoro would just refuse her? Personally, I think there is no way Zoro would refuse, and that he would be absolutely stoked at getting his hands on a sword like this. I'm sure I don't need to tell you guys this, but Zoro throughout the story has always been obsessed with making himself stronger, and this includes him looking for better weapons. Every time Zoro has gotten a new sword in the story, he's been downright gleeful at acquiring something that'll make him more powerful. A possible contention that I could see some fans having with Zoro getting a devil fruit sword is that it could steer away from Zoro's path of being a swordsman, where the powers of a dragon could be seen as not fitting Zoro's fighting style. Still, I don't actually agree with this argument. Zoro has actually never been someone who's dead set on only fighting by doing things like cutting, slashing and blocking with his swords. Zoro even has a fighting style called no sword style, where he literally just uses his body, and we've seen him fight with just his hands several times in the story. This speaks to a major aspect of Zoro's character, where he's not just the man who wants to be the world's strongest swordsman, but he's also the combatant of the Straw Hat Pirates, who wants to make Luffy the pirate king no matter what. We already saw this right before the time skip, where Zoro was willing to throw away his pride as a swordsman and train under Mihawk for the sake of Luffy. And this is something that has been carried over to the post-time skip, where Zoro has moments like him telling King that he might even bite off his throat if it means that he'll win. While a devil fruit sword could be seen as a curveball to Zoro's existing fighting style, this would also be nothing new, where One Piece has always been willing to experiment with things like this. If we for example look at the other members of the monster trio in the pre-time skip, the idea of Luffy seeing into the future, or Sanji having an exoskeleton, would have seemed completely outlandish, yet the story gave them these powers anyway. I also do not even think one of Zoro's swords getting the powers of an Azure Dragon would even be particularly different from how he's fought throughout the story. Zoro has already infused elements like fire into his attacks before, and he's already performed the same kinds of air cuts as Kaido even without the assistance of devil fruit powers. Some of Zoro and Kaido's attacks are actually similar to a point, where they even share the same names. I think this would essentially be how one of Zoro's swords eating the dragon fruit would work, where it more accurately would amplify Zoro's current fighting style rather than changing it, where Zoro with it would for example be able to perform even stronger air cuts or fire attacks. I also think the most important thing to consider here is choice, where it is ultimately up to Zoro which abilities he'd use if he got a dragon sword. If Zoro did not for example want to fly using the flame clouds, and only wanted to rely on the fruit's abilities like fire and wind, he could do that. Ultimately, I think I agree with what Oda said in his SBS quote earlier about this idea. Zoro getting a dragon sword would be pretty awesome. There's a lot of characters other than Shamrock who could have these kinds of devil fruit swords in the story, and I think I have a pretty good idea about who they might actually be. If you want to see me make a video about this, definitely click that like button, where I promise I'll start working on a video about every unconfirmed devil fruit sword user the moment this video hits 1000 likes. So yeah, thanks for all the members who support this channel, and definitely check out the channel membership feature if you want a weird shoutout like this at the end of my videos. As always, thanks a lot for watching this video to the end.